This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. After experiencing trauma, I went to therapy, and my therapist guided me through a difficult time in my life. They helped me understand what was happening and provided me with tools to cope and find my own strength and resilience. Their experience and compassion were invaluable and enabled me to rebuild my life and move forward. I strongly believe in the power of therapy to help people through difficult times. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. First, you go to their site. You can use my link, betterhelp.com/resilience. You answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who has years of experience helping people with struggles just like yours. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you, all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/resilience or choose podcast, then notes on resilience during sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month.
People that practice self-compassion, have a regular practice of self-compassion, are more resilient in the face of adversity. They are more likely to take accountability for their mistake, misgivings, or contribution to a negative situation.
Hello, and welcome to Notes on Resilience. I'm your host, Manya Chilinsky. My guest today is Massimo Backus. He has built a successful executive coaching practice based on the radical idea that self-compassion is a leadership epiphany. He's also the author of the book, Human First, Leader Second. We talked about compassion leadership and the importance of self-compassion. You are really going to enjoy this episode. Massimo, I'm glad you and I are talking today. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, me too. Pleasure.
Before we dive into the topic, I'd love to hear from you. What is one thing that you've done in any area of your life that you never thought you would do?
Well, that's a fun question. If I'm being honest, I think there's been many points in my life where I've dreamed a lot smaller and surprised myself. But I think most recently, is publishing a book, writing and publishing a book. I mean, as a kid, I didn't even read books. I'm dyslexic, and it just wasn't even a part of my identity, books or reading or talking about them or anything like that. So when I think about my younger self and realize that accomplishment, I think many, many past versions of myself would be blown away and pleasantly surprised by what we've accomplished, what we've achieved.
Oh, that's great to hear. Writing a book is an amazing accomplishment. And I like how you phrased it about thinking about a time when you've dreamt smaller than just was a reminder to me about dreaming big and going for the tough calls, going for the things you never imagined you could get.
A freedom that you have to find at some point to be able to dream big. But I've also found that there needs to be some self-acceptance when you realize maybe I don't want that anymore, and to let those dreams go and not see that as a failure, but you're just in a different place in life, and maybe it no longer interests you, or maybe you now have a better understanding of what it would take to accomplish that, and it doesn't match up with your priorities. So yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to talk yourself out of having big dreams. Pretty easy to do that.
Yes, it is easier than I wish it would be sometimes. So you and I were talking about compassion today and compassion in leadership. And just to get us started, why is it important that our organizations or our workplaces that we even be thinking about the topic of compassion?
I think that the topic of compassion in the workplace and organizations is something that's been well traveled over the last number of years, and thank goodness it is necessary by definition, at least in its current form and historically. The organizations that we work in and spend so much of our time in are defined by the people in them. They are an organization of people. That is what that makes them exist. And even if you look at it in the context of the business operates because of the people that are doing the work to make that happen. And so because it is defined by people, compassion is to not think about it as a non-starter, because compassion is about recognizing our humanity. So you look at an organization that is defined by people, that means that it is, by definition, humane. It's not mechanistic. It's not a machine. We can only optimize to our limitations, and we do have limitations as people, as much as we hate to recognize that. But that is part of our humanity. A limitation we have is our mortality. We're limited. We are all going to die. These are just truths that we accept, and yet we always try and optimize against those in this very mechanistic fashion. And the recognition that compassion needs to exist in organizations is just a recognition and acceptance of our humanity that's in it. What I think is often missing in those conversations around compassion is self-compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Not only need to recognize the humanity in other people, but I think first and foremost, we need to be able to recognize it in ourselves, because then we are coming from a place of humanity. We are coming from a place of empathy. We're coming from a place of understanding and curiosity and connection. And these are all buzzwords that we talk about, but it's just noise in the system if we just talk about it and we're not practicing it. And at the end of the day, we're really most responsible for compassion towards ourselves, first and foremost.
Right. Now, in your work with your clients, do you find that that self-compassion piece is difficult for people?
Yes, it's incredibly difficult for people. People can have a pretty visceral reaction to the idea of being nice to myself. Yuck. Or going one step further, which is where I'm oriented, which is not just liking yourself, but loving yourself. Oof, gosh, that is very uncomfortable. It can make people's skin crawl. I'm a servant leader. I'm happy to do that for the people, but I'm not sure that I'm worthy of that same treatment. And it begs a really powerful question, don't you think?
Yes, which is why.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had experiences of utter lack of compassion for myself. And one thing I have done when I've caught it, when I've recognized that's what's happening, is have said to myself, those words I just said about myself to myself in my head, would I say those to my best friend if she came to me with what's going on? And the answer is always, oh no, of course I would not speak to her that way. So why do we speak to ourselves that way?
You wouldn't say that to a friend, but you also wouldn't even think it. If your friend made a big mistake, the first thought would have been, you wouldn't think, you dummy, right? But for ourselves, that's our first snap judgment. So the first indication that we're in need of self-compassion is if you can answer the question that is, if I treated others the way I treat myself, would I have friends? For most people, the answer is no. And if the answer is no to that question, then okay, we have an obligation, we have a responsibility, we have a duty and an opportunity to learn how to do that. And one of the things that makes it very challenging is that we're not aware of it in the first place. We're not aware that we're doing it because we've always been doing it. And when you're so used to talking to yourself in one way, it's your norm. It's just a Tuesday. So it's hard to become aware of it. And then you have to recognize that there's been this counterfactual belief that is my success is linked to the fact that I'm hard on myself, that I'm successful because I push myself and I'm hard on myself and I don't rest on my laurels and because I'm perfectionistic, because I want more, because I, strive for excellence. And the way I do that is by being hard on myself, which is a myth. But again, it feels like a truth to us because it's probably been there for a long time and has gone unexamined.
Right. I think that's the key, those last two words, gone unexamined. And it is possible to push yourself and achieve and still have self compassion, right?
Oh, Manya, this is the exciting thing about self compassion. It seems to be one of the least known about psychological constructs. And yet, if you look at the evidence, it is so powerful. People that practice self compassion, have a regular practice of self compassion, are more resilient in the face of adversity. They are more likely to take accountability for their mistake, misgivings, or contribution to a negative situation. There's been studies with married couples where it ends in divorce. Those couples that practice self compassion, each party was more likely to come to the table and say, here's how I contributed to this marriage not working out. Just think about that for a moment. That's powerful. That's not pointing the finger and saying it's your fault. Obviously, you may have those feelings, but it's also saying, but how did I contribute to this? Not in the way of beating myself up because it's all my fault, but it's a relationship. And there's always, every party in a relationship contributes to that relationship. When it comes to learning and someone's ability to adapt and learn from setbacks is increased when there's self-compassion. When it comes to collaboration in organizations, it creates a greater degree of psychological safety because someone recognizes that they are not defined by the event, by the mistake, or their idea wasn't accepted in the discussion, and therefore they're not worthy, or the team, they're able to recognize that that moment is not defining of who they are, their quality, their contribution. And it goes on and on and on, the benefits of this. And I think that it is the lowest common denominator of effective leadership. It enhances our capacity in all ways, but it is all about our relationship to ourselves. It's not for anyone else's consumption. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that's the part of it that feels antithetical to what it means to be a leader or what it means to be in community with other people. I think there's myths around it that it's selfish to be self-compassionate, or there would be a form of self-pity, and it's not, based on the research of it's actually building resources and accountability, so that it's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a tremendous sign of strength, which I also think is evidenced by the fact that it's very difficult to do. So, for people that are like, well, I need to struggle a little bit to know that I'm working for something that's meaningful. Try and be kind to yourself when you've made a mistake. It's not easy, and it will test you in new ways.
As you're talking, I'm thinking we have such a hard time accepting this piece of who we are, and it's who we all are, and it's how we're wired. Why is it so hard to have those thoughts about ourselves, to be compassionate, to be fair to ourselves?
That's the $1 trillion question, and there are commonalities, but it's unique for each person. And the commonality is that it comes down to some source, some sense of I'm not enough. That looks different for each person. That story was created differently for each person based on their upbringing and their family. And it could be some form of trauma for some people. And, I think that real serious trauma. And then I think there's being human and living your life can be traumatic, right? I just think it can be hard, just that alone, even if everything's going your way. But it stems from that I'm not enough. That those moments of rejection, those moments of not being seen, heard, loved, appreciated, and times when you need it. And so we create mechanisms for ourselves to achieve those things because fundamentally all people want to be seen, heard, appreciated, and loved. All of us. Mm-hmm. We go about it differently, but it shows up in pretty consistent patterns because what we're looking for is what is the behavior? How do I need to show up in the world? Who do I need to be in order to get that? Do I need to be people pleasing? Do I need to be controlling? Do I need to be perfectionistic? Do I need to be the smartest person? Or do I need to be quick witted and funny? Do I need to be a wallflower and not speak up? What is it that you learn to do as a coping mechanism? And I call them our well intentioned, misinformed protectors. Well intentioned because these mechanisms develop to help us out. They're trying to help us give us what we need, which is this sense of being seen and appreciated. They're misinformed because these oftentimes develop when we're children.
Yes.
And so you've got a 10-year-old who's come up with this mechanism and it's pretty effective. It works. It works all the way into adulthood. It works until it doesn't work. And we realize it doesn't work because the marriage fell apart, the job didn't work, you got feedback from your team that you're not showing up the way that you think you are. And then we get confronted with reality that, oh, this is a pretty outdated model that I'm operating with, but it's what I've always known and it's never been examined because it's what I've always known. And I've got a career of success to say that it works. So why would I let that go, the devil I know, for this other idea of being kind to myself? Well, that just does not sound like a recipe for success. It's how people tend to look at it on its surface. And by the way, I think it's really important that I am not some genius who discovered this. I mean, first of all, this idea of self love and self compassion has been around for millennia and is deep in Eastern traditions. But my discovery of it came because I was a cynic of it and skeptical of it, and my old coping mechanisms stopped working for me, and I felt bad, and I got to a point where I had to surrender all of my judgment and my high minded ideals of what I thought it meant to be successful, and say, well, maybe the self love thing is worth exploring because everything else I've tried isn't working.
Right. As you were talking, I was realizing what we need. Now, not everybody who in the workplace or managers or leaders goes to business school, but what we need in the MBA programs is a mandatory course called You Are Enough, where we help people see that. And you're right, these are patterns that develop as we are learning to make our way through the world. And if they're not serving us, and it's important to recognize them. So, yeah, I want to see that class in MBA programs.
Me too. Me too. I'd like to see it for elementary school students. You
Yes.
know, I wish it didn't take me so long to learn this. I wish that my clients don't come to discover it themselves in a point of crisis or pain.
Hmm.
Like, what would be possible if it was something that they always knew how to do? And you're never done. There is no finish line. There's no day that you wake up and you're like, well, I don't have to do that anymore. I mean, it is an ongoing practice, and there are periods of time that I've got a great relationship with myself, and there's periods of times where I don't, and I just have to keep coming back to it. But I also know that it is a relationship. I've been married for 16 years. I love my wife dearly. It takes a lot of work, and it will continue to. And I don't mean work like it's labor. I mean it takes effort because I care, and the relationship with ourselves is no different, and yet is often an afterthought.
Yes. As if we all suppose it's just supposed to work.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just supposed to be that way. And then we get those glimpses where it's like, oh, I'm having a good day and or things are going my way. That feels great. But oftentimes the question we should be asking ourselves is, are things going my way because of my environment, because the external conditions are giving me this validation? I got the promotion. People compliment me on this. All these things are going well for me, which, by the way, those are wonderful things. But what would it be like if you didn't need it? What would it be like if you were liberated from the need of external validation from others because you had a practice to give yourself the validation and the love and support that you need?
Right.
Have you ever given somebody like a really thoughtful, meaningful compliment or form of recognition and they just kind of like brush it off?
Yes.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Because you know that people want to hear that, but they can't take it.
No, it can be very difficult. And I myself have struggled. I'm better at it now, but it was sort of, oh yeah, great, thanks. And now on to our next thing. Thanks for saying that. Good. Now what else? Or I know something I would do, which is quickly say something nice about them to just
Mm-hmm.
to make it even. And then it's not about me.
Yep. Yeah. And yet that's a moment where you're being seen, right? So the very thing that we want, when we get it, we're not comfortable having it.
I love human behavior when we just on the abstract level, thinking about the things that we need and respond to and don't respond to, and all of the things that we're talking about. It's so fascinating how we sabotage ourselves sometimes. Now, you mentioned external factors, and earlier you said the word trauma. So that is one can be fully self compassionate and then have something happen that brings a trauma or is a traumatic incident. And people don't like that word trauma. I know that in my own work because that's something I talk about. And it's really a trigger for people. And, but it is a real thing that happens. So, how do we balance that? What do we do about that?
Well, when you say that people don't like trauma, and it's not that I disagree, but what What do you hear about it that people don't like? Because that's what I get really curious about. What does it mean to people that they don't like?
In the couple examples I'm thinking of, people have replied with, well, I've never experienced a trauma, or we don't have any trauma in our organization. And yet I know from what we've just been talking about that that's not true, that something has happened that is clearly traumatic. So I think it's a defense mechanism. Hi, it's Manya. You're listening to Notes on Resilience, conversations about leadership, recovery, and how we show up in the difficult moments. If something here hits home, or if you're navigating a crisis, or you're seeing something in your team you want to talk through, I'd love to hear from you. You can get in touch at my website, manyachilinsky.com. Now, back to the episode.
Yeah, I think it's a defense mechanism. I think that maybe trauma has an association of weakness or victim. And again, some people who have been through trauma are victims. Like there is, I think we need to kind of separate. There's the real kind of capital T trauma, and then there is just the trauma of going through life. If you are in a very high stress environment, the other day I was just driving in the car with my family, and I was partially in a crosswalk, and it was like really busy downtown area. I didn't know exactly where I was going. The light wasn't turning, and some guy crosses the street and he like slams on the hood of the car, and flicks us off. I had a visceral reaction to that, right? I felt that in my body. Now, I don't need to go to a therapist as a result of it. I wouldn't say that I was fully traumatized, but in that moment, there was like, wow, that was a visceral reaction of my fight, flight, freeze response was triggered. Right? Those are the types of moments that happen to us. That's not unique to me. Maybe the being in the crosswalk part that was bad on me. But my point is, those types of things can happen all the time, and they can be these little trauma type triggers. Then you put somebody in the organization and you say, okay, now there's a power dynamic. This is your livelihood. This is how you pay your bills. You have a manager. This person has authority over your performance. They're the ones that are going to be saying whether you got a promotion or not, or whether you get your names on the list for the next set of layoffs. And there's a lot of pressure in that dynamic. And then you say there's expectations, and now you're being compared to your peers. And you're in an environment where maybe you don't feel like you can be fully honest about everything that you're feeling. What sort of pressure cooker does that put in people?
Right.
So to try and say that there isn't any sort of trauma in that, it's getting hung up on the word trauma and less like, well, what is the experience that people are having?
Yes.
And that's a common experience with those that are spending their weekends, ruminating and having a conversation with somebody at work, but not actually having the conversation with them. And they're at their dinner table with their family and they're ruminating about some work thing. This is a visceral thing. Like your cortisol levels are elevated as a result of this, and that would map to trauma responses. So unfortunately, we live in a time, Manya, where words can just, the definition of them can kind of be co-opted and used for a whole variety of things. And then we lose the plot. And so I typically, when I'm working with people, I don't like, let's make sure we're talking about the same idea and we can call it whatever you want to call it. If trauma doesn't work for you, that's fine. But let's describe it so we know we're still talking about the same thing. And let's put it in language that works for you.
Well, and that gets at something I think about a lot and talk about a lot, which is how important the role of communication is, right? Making sure you're both on the same page, you're talking about the same thing, whatever words you're using. Because if I say trauma and you think that has to be violence and disaster, but I'm thinking it just means like kind of what we were talking about, the sort of everyday experiences that we have, then we're already coming at it where we don't even have the same understanding.
Yes. And it makes me think of how the people that use different terms can sometimes misuse them. As somebody who spent my career working in leadership development, there is no shortage of tools and concepts out there, right? I have seen many of these tools and concepts get weaponized. Take a personality assessment like DISC, okay? Someone says that they are a high D, that means that, oh, that says that I'm really direct. That's what my assessment says. So they go into a meeting and they're like a bull in a china closet and they're just kind of firing off directives. And they say, this is just me because I'm a high D. It's like, well, just because your profile suggests that you might be direct does not give you permission to be an asshole. So you're weaponizing it. And I see this happening time and time again. And it's the same is true for self compassion. And so I do think that when people are saying, this is traumatic for me as a mechanism to separate themselves or as some sort of like form of manipulation within a relationship, I think that's really troublesome, right? So we have to be able to be accountable for how are we using this, and it is no one's place to say what is traumatic for another person. We need to keep that for ourselves, but we do need to be very careful about how we label that as if someone else is the cause of it, right?
Yes.
We have to own our feelings is what I'm saying.
Yes. Yes. I come from a place in my own experience where something truly awful happened. I had no control over it. And that is a that is difficult to experience a trauma like that. And then at some point working through all of it, realizing like, okay, and I'm responsible for how I move forward from this. Now, those were certainly not thoughts I had early on in the experience, but eventually came to recognize, oh yeah, the classic, you're responsible for your own feelings. You can't make somebody do something, but you can choose how you respond. And that if and when someone actually experiences objective, for most people would believe this is a trauma, it is hard to get to that point of remembering that the feelings are my own to deal with and my own to manage.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to ask themselves if they feel like they're on the receiving end of it, have they ever been on the contributing end of it? I'm pretty sure that throughout my career as a manager, I've created some traumatic experiences for people that work with me. It is something that I can't go back in time and change, something that I have to take full responsibility for and be able to forgive myself for it. But I also feel like if I'm going to do that, then I need to forgive the people that have been contributors of that for me.
Yes.
Again, very difficult things to do. This is not easy work. But when you can let that go and then you come back to just what is it that I'm responsible for, it is truly a liberating place to be. Because you and I both know the sad truth is no one is thinking about us as much as we're thinking about us.
Exactly. Yes.
So the more time we spend thinking about other people, it's reciprocated. And to what end? How do we wake up in the morning and feel good about who we are? How do we end our day with gratitude and appreciation for what we got to experience in conversations like this? What did I get to do today with this time that I have on earth? And I see that there's a trend and we're moving closer to this, but a large part of it is being able to talk about it from the first person in our own experience and not push it on other people. And that's another risk that I see is this worked for me. I've been transformed. You must do this. And as someone who is an evangelist for self-compassion, I try and put it in the context of this is my experience. If any of this sounds interesting to the people, try it out.
Right.
You don't have to. You could spend the rest of your life thinking that you're not enough or, believing that you need to suffer to succeed. That's everyone's choice. But when you find another way, it's about an invitation as opposed to instruction.
Right. I appreciate that. And we all like to be invited to do things, and nobody likes to be told what to do.
Yeah, yeah. Can I share something with you, Manya? That
Please do.
so I was giving a opening keynote a few weeks back, and as a part of it, I read a declaration of self-compassion that is in my book. That's my own declaration of self-compassion to kind of claim it and say, actually, I want to be proactive in the relationship that I have with myself because I know that it influences every other relationship they have, those relationships that matter most. And when I finished kind of reciting this during the keynote, one of the people in the audience raised their hand and they said, would it be okay if we read this all together? Meaning, could we make this our declaration and could we all read it out loud together? And so 150 people read this declaration out loud together. And at the end of it, there was a collective awe in the room.
Yes.
And there was an emotional response that many people had. maybe a little bit of sadness of, oh my gosh, I didn't know that's what I needed. I've been hard on myself,
Mm-hmm.
but also a sigh of relief to just put it into words.
Yes.
Because sometimes the first step is the scariest, and sometimes just saying these things the first time is the scariest. But to do it in community like that, it was beautiful. I mean, it was a very moving experience to witness and just be a part of.
That sounds so powerful.
It really was. It really was. So I just want to share that for others that might find it to be helpful. And this declaration comes from the work of Bob Dunham at the Institute for Generative Leadership. And here it is. I am a human being. I'm only a human being. I'm not Superman or Superwoman. I'm not perfect. Perfection is only a story good for suffering. And I've been living that story my whole life. But now I see that it's just my story. And I can be the author of my story rather than a victim of it. This old story is just an echo of an old conversation that got trapped in my nervous system and has been haunting me ever since. But it's not the truth. It's just a story. I'm not a machine. I'm a human being, and human beings are finite. I can't know everything. I can't do everything. I can't please everybody, but I can do a lot. I can make invitations. I can make requests. I can make offers. I can produce actions with others to create a shared future that we all care about and make it happen. And that is pretty freaking amazing. So I hereby declare a new story that I am a human being, and that is enough. Thanks to life.
Wow. I got chills listening to that. I can imagine what it was like in that room. And Massimo, that is the perfect way for us to end this episode. But before we go, first of all, thank you so much. Can you please share with our listeners a little bit more about yourself and how they can reach you?
Thank you, Manya. And this has been a pleasure for me as well. MassimoBackus.com, Massimo Backus on LinkedIn. And if you are curious about self compassion and specifically how does that fit into your role as a leader, please check out my book, Human First, Leader Second. And I view this as an invitation for other people to have the epiphany that I had and that so many of my clients have had. And it's the epiphany of self-compassion that it opens up a door to so many possibilities, and it costs nothing to be kinder to ourselves, but the impact is priceless.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I'll put those links in the show notes. And thank you for being here today. And thank you to our listeners for sticking with us through the episode. And we will catch you on the next one.